Hello everyone and welcome to the AHP. We hope you enjoyed the WOW show and thank you so much for joining us for this Allied Health Professionals Q&A panel.
So we are Jo and Ena. We are two NHS physiotherapists and we're the co-creators of OnTheFrontlineAHP platform and the AHPs Off the Record podcast. Through our social media platforms and podcasts, we're aiming to provide and promote a better understanding of what the allied health professional roles are, and also provide an honest insight into what it's like to study and to work as an allied health professional.
So since starting our platform in March 2020, following the start of the pandemic, we have now had over 20,000 followers across all of our social media platforms and have published 12 podcast episodes with over 2,500 listens in just over a year. So you'll actually be able to find some of our podcast episodes for various different AHP professions in the VR 360 booth. But we also hope to see you again at 3:45, where we'll be hosting the AHP keynote speech.
So during this panel session, we'll be recreating a live version of one of our AHPs Off the Record podcasts. We've invited some of our On the Frontline AHP ambassadors, currently Laura and Rebecca, to share with you their experiences of discovering their chosen profession, studying during the pandemic, and also any top tips for any aspiring allied health professional students. We also have some AHP related questions and a poll which will be coming up during our panel, so please pop in some answers into the chat box and we'll be taking any questions you might have at the end.
Okay, so before we start, we want to get everybody to introduce themselves a little bit. So maybe Laura, if you don't mind starting.
Hi, I'm Laura and I'm a second year MSc physiotherapy student currently at the University of Southampton.
And Rebecca?
My name's Rebecca. I'm a second year Diagnostic Radiography student at the University of Cumbria.
Lovely. So the first question we'd love to ask you guys is, how did you first hear about your chosen profession? So Laura, if you go first.
So initially, I heard about physiotherapy when I was at school. So initially I wanted to do medicine, but then when I was picking my A-level options, I changed my mind as I wanted to do a more broader degree in science and medicine and healthcare first. This also allowed me to have some experience in working in healthcare as well, so that when I then started my physio role, I had more experience initially. My mum's also a nurse, so she was the one that suggested that physio might be something I'd be interested in.
Amazing, and Hannah's just joined us. She's another On the Frontline AHP ambassadors. So Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself and then tell us how you first heard about your chosen profession?
Yeah, sorry about that. That was really stressful. So my name's Hannah Rowland. I'm an occupational therapist currently working in the NHS, currently working in stroke rehab. I first heard about occupational therapy through a family friend. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was 18, and she said, "Oh, have you heard about occupational therapy?" I was like, "No, what's that?" And then, yeah, the rest is history.
Rebecca?
So I also had an interest in doing something health related. So I'd heard of radiography when I was doing my research, but I've never had a scan or an x-ray or any other radiographic procedure. So it wasn't really until I started volunteering with the first aid organisation and I started talking to one of the radiographers who also volunteered there that I really found out what radiography was about.
Thank you, guys. So what was it specifically about your different professions that drew you to want to actually study that profession? So Hannah, if you go first for us, please.
Well, as I said, I knew I wanted to work in healthcare, and I've always known that I wanted to work with people. Through my teenage years, I was always a waitress, and I really enjoyed the aspect of that kind of person-facing job, kind of connecting with people in work. And then I kind of, obviously, as I looked into occupational therapy, I saw how practical it is, how holistic it is, how you're kind of using activities that people do every day to kind of help someone increase their independence. And I was like, well, what more could you want? And then, yeah, so I got some work experience just on an older adult medical ward when I was doing my A-levels. Just spent a day shadowing this occupational therapist, and I mean, medical wards aren't the nicest places, but it was just the way that the occupational therapist connected with the patients and was kind of helping them facilitate a safe discharge home. And I thought that was really nice, because obviously I feel like that part of an inpatient stay is forgotten about. So yeah.
I completely agree with all of that. I think as a physio, we kind of have those similar experiences, especially on those wards and those discharging situations, especially. So how about you, Laura?
So initially, when I was at school, I was very, very sporty, and so I thought that's why I thought physio was what I wanted to go into, because it combined sport and it combined like anatomy and medicine and science. And then it wasn't until I got some work experience similar to Hannah in a hospital in the NHS that I suddenly realised there's so much more to physio than just the sports side of it. And actually, for me, I was most interested in the more medical side. So I spent a day in ITU, which is intensive care, and on some of the respiratory wards. And I found that side of physio really, really interesting, because I didn't know that physios could help people with their breathing and that sort of side of things. So I think it was just that there's so much more to physio than what people necessarily first think about it, whether that's like, massage and the sports side. But they work all across the hospitals, and not just in hospitals as well. So I think, the fact you can work anywhere really is really, really interesting.
Definitely. And then lastly, how about you, Rebecca?
The main thing that really drew me to radiography was that you interact with patients from all walks of life. 1 minute you might be interacting with a patient who's just had a major trauma. You might be seeing a patient who's going through cancer treatment. You scan and x-ray patients in surgery. All ages, all walks of life, which I really like. One other thing is that so many patients who come into hospital require medical imaging. So I like the fact that radiography, it involves so many patients, like you're involved in so many different patient pathways. And another thing is the technical aspect of it for me. I'm really interested in X-ray physics and the physics behind the scan. So I like that I could combine that with the anatomy and physiology that I already enjoyed from learning it in A-levels.
Amazing. We've also had an answer for this question from another of our On the Frontline AHPs. Am I? I shouldn't be. Can you hear me now? So we've also had an answer about this from one of our other On the Frontline AHP ambassadors, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today. And she said, I've always had an interest in food and nutrition and always saw myself working in a healthcare setting. So when I learned about the role of a dietitian, I knew it was the perfect role for me. It wasn't until I was able to attend 2 dietetic awareness days that I was really able to learn how diverse the role of a dietitian can be and how many specialist areas they work in. I was also able to complete shadowing in both the acute and community settings, which really solidified my desire to become a dietitian. If you're interested in dietetics, some hospitals may be hosting online dietetic awareness events to learn more about the role, or may hopefully be able to host some shadowing once the infection control restrictions are eased, which is a great way to get a good taste for the profession. So that's from Claudia, who's another of our AHP ambassadors, our student AHP ambassadors, who's currently studying in her 3rd year of dietetics. So our next question is directed at you, Rebecca, and it's, what are you most looking forward to about qualifying as a diagnostic radiographer?
I'm looking forward to it. It's coming around quite quickly, but I'm lucky that I'm going into a profession that I really like. I'm just looking forward to working independently, gaining more knowledge and skills and confidence, seeing more patients in different cases. And then further down the line, there's the opportunity to specialise. I'm not sure what I want to do yet. There's so many options. So scanning in CT and MRI, using live x-rays in fluoroscopy and interventional radiology, or breast screening and doing biopsies in mammography. So I'm not sure what I want to do yet, but it's exciting what I could do.
So Laura, the next question is directed at you. What area of physio would you like to specialise in when you qualify?
So for me, I know that when I first qualify, which should be in January, that I want to do my rotations. So it's similar to lots of other health professions where you do 3 to 4 months on a particular ward or specialty, and then you rotate to cover lots of different specialties initially, so that you get a broad range of experience before you start going up into more senior roles. So I definitely want to do that to get my broad competencies. But then over the last year or so, I've really developed an interest in pelvic health or women's health, which is an area I didn't know that physios could work in until recently. And this is working with like pregnant women, or people that have had trauma and become incontinent, and all of those sorts of things. So I find that really, really interesting, and how physios can have such an impact on a patient's quality of life. But then I think maybe when I'm a little bit older and I've had more experience, I can definitely see myself coming back as a lecturer or an educator as well, or maybe going into research. So I think it's really interesting that once you are a health profession, you don't have to stay as a clinical person, that you can go into research or education or lots of different areas as well. So I can definitely see myself doing that in the future.
Absolutely. And Laura, you've studied a M course rather than a BSc course for physio. Could you just tell us a bit more about that and the differences? Or
yeah. So I'm doing my master's at the moment. So it's a 3-year course condensed into 2 years. So I'm doing a 2-year course. So my undergrad was in it was half sports science, half biomedical science, which were the two things that I'm really, really interested in. And so this gave me a broader experience of science and healthcare, and allowed me to work as a healthcare assistant as well, to get some more practical experience. The main differences between the two courses are that at master's level, you're expected to have like a higher quality of academic writing. So we're expected to do more critical analysis, read lots of scientific papers, and to help us write our essays. So we have exactly the same lectures as the BSc, the undergrad students, and we're in the same cohort. But then we have a few more assignments on top of that, the writing essays or doing presentations and things that they don't do, that gives us the level 7, the master's level. In terms of actually when you then qualify, we will all go into the same jobs initially, but in theory you can progress up the roles a bit quicker, and some jobs require you to have a master's degree, so that's helpful.
Thanks, Laura. Sorry, I think my my microphone's working a little bit better now. I'll ask the next question, which actually is directed to Hannah. So Hannah, you're one of our ambassadors who is actually working at the moment. So what are you finding to be the hardest thing about working currently, definitely kind of related to everything that's been happening with the pandemic?
Yeah. I'm getting some bad feedback. Sorry, I don't like hearing myself. So I think during the pandemic, the main thing was the kind of intensity of it, and the kind of fear around it. We didn't really know what was going on, what was going to happen. Obviously there was PPE shortages. We were all like, oh, what's going on? Staff were going off. And I think one of the main things, as I mentioned earlier, from an occupational therapy point of view, obviously a lot of what we do on acute wards is kind of discharge planning, kind of ensuring people can manage safely and independently at home. And during the pandemic, it was this kind of rush to get people discharged, as obviously hospital wasn't the safest place to be. And that was really scary as an occupational therapist, because we were discharging people before they were necessarily ready. And it was kind of, we kind of had to forget about everything that we'd been doing before and everything that we trained to do, and we're having to just kind of discharge people and hope that community services would pick them up. So that was a really intense and strange time. Obviously, post-COVID, off the back of the pandemic, one of the main things which I think everyone's talking about at the moment is the long waiting lists, and it's the impact that COVID and lockdown has had on, I think, particularly the older generation as well, the older population. They've all been kind of cooped up for 12, 16 months now. So we've seen a reduction in their communication skills, their cognition, their mobility, all these things that I think none of us really realised before are so kind of reliant on that social interaction with people and being able to go out and do things. So I think that's really difficult. One of the main things from a inpatient point of view as well is patients not being allowed visitors. And that's been really difficult. So having to kind of liaise with family and stuff like that kind of virtually. Obviously visitors, we're starting to allow a little bit more now. I think where I work, it's kind of once a week. But I work on a stroke unit, and after someone's had a stroke, it's really difficult to portray to the family over the phone how impaired they might be now. So that's been really difficult. But I think one positive that's come from that, kind of looking at it in a slightly positive way, is that the NHS has kind of shifted things to a more virtual way and updated its virtual programmes, and that's definitely beneficial and was definitely needed. So that's one kind of positive. I also think that COVID has brought kind of all staff and professions closer together. As we all kind of have like a mutual understanding of each other now. And I think during COVID, you had OTs, physios, dietitians, speech and language therapists being NAs on the ward. We were being nursing assistants, just trying to help with the kind of patient load, and just to kind of ensure people were managing well on the ward, because obviously nursing staff was short. So I think we all have a bit of more of a mutual understanding of each other, which is really nice. But yeah, it's kind of trying to pluck out the positive things that have come out of such a negative kind of situation.
Definitely. And I think also I would assume from like Laura and Rebecca's perspective as well, being students at this time during the pandemic, having to adjust your learning and things like that, and all of that uncertainty during a time when you're meant to be kind of learning as much as you can be quite scary. But it's been a learning opportunity. I think Joe and I have both been educators or clinical educators during this time for AHP students, physio students specifically, and I mean, the feedback at the end of it is actually that they've learned so much from such a challenging time, that's actually going to put them in really good stead for when they do qualify and have to face the new NHS or the new working world. So yeah, there's definitely some positive from that. And we want to ask you as a question, just any top tips for any aspiring students that would be looking to join your profession? So Rebecca, do you mind going first?
Yeah, so for radiography, I'd say if you're interested, try and get some work experience if you can in hospital in radiology. Just email your local hospital, the local hospital trust, and hopefully they should be able to get some work experience for you, just so you can see if it's something you like. I also think that any care work experience or volunteering is really useful. I volunteered with a first aid group and at a local hospice before I started university, and I think it put me in really good stead for placement. And my other tip is that there's loads of online resources for radiography. There's loads of students and radiographers on Instagram and Twitter who are more than happy to help answer any questions. So yeah, I can put some useful searches in the chat box if you want.
Perfect. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah.
I think, yeah, similarly to Rebecca, I think one of the main things would be kind of looking for work experience in your local hospital or places like that, just so you have a bit more of an understanding of what they do day to day. As often, obviously, it's great to look at resources and things like that. But I think especially with occupational therapy, our role is so varied that you might read one definition online, but then what we do in another place might be slightly different. So I think it's really good to try and get that experience just to get a bit more of an understanding of what we actually do day to day. Another thing, kind of more when you're actually at uni doing the course, obviously, as you can imagine, it can be quite an intense course. I think all AHP courses are exactly the same. You're going on placements when other people doing more kind of non-vocational degrees aren't going on placements. And yeah, I think it's just really important to look after your mental health when you're in uni, seeking support through all the kind of university channels, through the SU, occupational health, all those places, and just chatting to your peers, seeing how everyone else is getting on. But I think, yeah, the most important thing would just be to have fun with it as well, and just kind of enjoy your time and enjoy learning. Enjoy learning about all the different things that you can learn about. So yeah.
And last but not least, Laura.
So I'd echo what Rebecca and Hannah said about trying to get some experience. Obviously, with COVID, it's been more challenging, but there are different ways that you can have online experiences now, and obviously events like this are really good. But I think then when you're applying in your personal statements or applications, it's about saying, you know, what you have done, but more importantly, what you learned from what you did, because they'll be understanding that not everybody has been able to go into hospital and see wards and things. So the experiences that you have managed to get is about what you've learned, and therefore how that would help you in your future profession. And then I think once you're actually at uni, things like staying on top of your note taking, I know it's quite a broad thing, but it's really important, particularly like Hannah said, when the courses are so busy and so fast paced. Then when you go out on placement and things, it's trying to take any opportunity that you can to see not only your own profession, but interacting with the whole team. So we call it a multidisciplinary team. So we'll all be working together to help one particular patient's journey. So trying to see everything from lots of people's views is really good.
Guys, and actually, as we said before, Claudia, our dietetics on the Frontline AHP ambassador, gave us some top tips for anyone who's interested in studying dietetics. So she said, have a look at the British Dietetics Association website to learn more about the varied role of what a dietitian can be. Any experience is good experience, because it's difficult to get work experience in dietetics at the moment, but your weekend or summer job will still provide you with vital transferable skills into the dietetic profession. So that could be, for example, your communication skills, your team working skills, and your time management. She said, join a sport or society at uni. It's the best thing that you can do. So obviously, just building up that social network, even if it isn't with people that are necessarily on your course, can give you a lot more, a wider scope or a wider variety of experiences. Don't stress about placement. They're the best part of being a dietetic student, and your supervisors will always be supportive. She's also said, try following some dietitians on social media who talk about the profession and the day-to-day working, because many of them will be really happy to answer your questions if you just drop them a message, like a DM or something, about their uni experience or their experience in working. Claudia said that she's also happy if anyone does want to contact her about dietetics directly through Instagram, then she's also happy for us to do that, so we can put those details there if you need it.
So that's it from us for this morning. Thanks so much for listening, and it's been interesting and that you've hopefully learned a bit about what it means to be an allied health professional. We'd like to say thank you to Carrie and to the Health Careers Live team and Health Education England for having us here this morning. It's been really fun. We hope you enjoy the rest of the day. We're happy to answer any burning questions you might have if you want to put them in the chat box. And otherwise, we hope to see you later on the Inspire stage when 3 of us will be doing the AHP keynote speech. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Guys, we'll just leave it open for some questions in the chat section for a while. It was a really interesting talk, and it's great. Obviously, we're sat here in Manchester today in the studio, but to see that you're all spread out around the country, and the way that your podcast sort of brings everybody together within the different professions, it's fantastic. I'm still buzzing from being on the podcast myself a couple of weeks ago, so it's great to see and hear from you again. it really is fantastic, especially to know that, you know, these careers are accessible for anybody if they put their mind to it. And ultimately, you know, to hear a little bit of insight from your perspective about your own career development and plans is absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much for that. If you have got any questions, anybody, then do pop them into the chat, and we'll try and get those answered for you. The next session is going to be at 11:30, and that's the AHP Digital Session. So we will have 5 speakers discussing. Sorry, James, in the shot there. We'll have 5 speakers discussing technology in healthcare and how that can be utilised to develop the care that we deliver to our patients. But before then, we're going to have a short break. But first of all, we've got a video from Alex, who is a physiotherapist. He's going to give us some insight into his role. So in terms of questions, if anybody's got any, then this is the time to ask while the speakers are still live on the stage. We'll give that a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. What time you went on?
So we'll wrap that session up there. So thank you guys for coming on. That was absolutely fantastic. Next YouTube video I will load, and then at the end of that we'll have a short break until 11:30 when we've got the next live sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.